Hi, I'm Dr. Mark.
And I'm Liz. Welcome to Marriage Matters.
You know, this show is created because marriage does matter. We will focus over this series of shows on all of what matters in marriage. We are going to find a place for each and every one of you to find inspiration, to find hope, and to bring back a deepening love with those who matter most.
So Mark and I are marriage coaches, and this show is dedicated to building and maintaining a healthy and happy relationship with your partner through hope and inspiration.
So today, we are truly lucky to have an extraordinary guest, and I don't want to miss any of his extraordinary nature. So joining us from Vancouver, Canada, is an IPEC certified performance, transition, and leadership coach who has positively impacted thousands of lives, from CEOs and professional athletes to individuals and couples. We are truly excited to introduce to you Walt Aguilar, once again joining us in the early morning from Vancouver, Canada. Welcome, Walt.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys, and I hope the weather's fantastic out there in your parts of the world. But you're right, it is bright and early out here, and I'm glad to be here as your first guest. Thank you. Feel privileged.
Well, we are so grateful to have you, and we know our audience is going to be grateful to have you because today we are going to be talking about one of our favorite books, and yours as well. It is Gary Chapman's The 5 Love Languages. And the reason that Mark and I reached out to Walt is because Walt has coached couples on the 5 love languages and uses them a lot because, well, you know, I'm not even going to say. We're going to let Walt explain to you why he thinks that the 5 love languages are incredibly important in any relationship.
Yeah, thanks, Liz.
Sure.
I think the idea of the 5 love languages is so important because at the very core of our marriages is love. Mm-hmm. And what happens is that all of us experience love differently. And if you really want to know how you experience love, they've done actually interviews with young children, and they've asked them, how do you know that mommy loves you, or how do you know that daddy loves you? And based on their answers, they've actually been able to determine what a child's primary love language is. For example, if the 5 languages are words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and personal touch. And when you ask a child, how do you know mommy loves you? Well, if the child says, because she gives me lots of hugs, right there you got personal touch. If you ask a young boy, how do you know that daddy loves you? Oh, because he does a lot of things for me. He takes me to school, he drives me, so it's acts of service. Another one is, how do you know that daddy loves you? Well, he comes home and he brings me gifts. So that would be the receiving gifts. The other one is how do you know mommy loves you? Because she spends time with me, right? She talks with me. She goes with walks with me. How do you know daddy loves you? Well, he tells me all the time how much he loves me and how good of a boy I am and what have you. So right off the bat, when we're young, we learn to experience love based on the most significant people in our lives, our parents. So, well, as we grow up, we remember these things, and they set the foundation for how we experience love.
So Walt, so then moving on to, that's a great, thank you for all that, because I think that explains a lot to people where it really starts. We really learn our love languages right from when we're little. So then how is it important to understanding the 5 love languages in communicating with your partner? Well,
here's what's really interesting, is that when we first met our partner, you guys remember back when you first met and you're just starting that infatuation stage or that feeling good stage. And in a lot of those times, there was so much positivity around the relationship that all of us intuitively would experiment with the different love languages, especially men. You know how they talk about the courting process. So we as men would try different things. We would tell our significant others how beautiful they were, right? Words of affirmation. We would have these dates, or even sometimes being on the phone till 2-3 hours on the phone, right? Which would be the quality time. We would buy special gifts, right? We would go out of our way to be of service. Right? Oh, your car broke down. No worries. Hey, can I take that? Like, we would be willing to do that. And also, we held hands a lot. If you notice, one of the things, and so what we did early on, there was a lot of experimentation because we were so committed to being committed, if you know what I mean, right?
Absolutely. So then how does that evolve over time in a relationship? Because you talked a lot about the beginning, and I know I was thinking back to mine. I'm sure you were thinking back to yours. How do the 5 love languages evolve as a relationship, is longer, 20 years married, 30 years married? Do they stay the same? Does it change?
Well, just like in the same way that as children, right? Yeah, you wouldn't, the way you would communicate with a 10-year-old as opposed to a 20-year-old would definitely be different, and also their language would be different. So one of the things that happens in relationships as well, the language evolves. It doesn't stay the same. So what happens is that, remember at the start where we were just intuitively just hitting all the love languages for each other. Well, what happens is that over time, there's a thing called stress reactions, the responsibilities of survival, of maintaining a house, of going to work, of having kids, of changing diapers. There's a lot of things that happen that create stress reactions, which what it basically does is that, remember when we first started, everything was positive, and we're in these, there's a state of being that was really allowed us to be very intuitive, very creative. Well, what we did, as you guys know as coaches, is that, and people you don't even need assessment to know that when we get under stress reaction, we show up differently. And how we show up differently is that we get into kind of the me stage. We take things personally. We get overwhelmed. We get very fearful. And what happens is that blocks our creativity and our intuition. And so what happens is that we start to focus more on sort of how our world is going, and we're not even aware of how we're showing up for the other person. So what happens is that where before we would do all the love languages, then what happens, we get really busy, we get stressed out. We'll have a tendency to show love for the other person the way that we experience love. So, for example, if Liz's love language was gifts, she might actually find that she would be buying you, Mark, gifts, right? And yet that may not be your primary love language, right? So what happens is that sometimes what happens is because of all the stress, we forget to be, we lose that connection to one another, that intuitive knowingness that we had with one another at the start. And we start to just love other people based on our love language. And so what that actually can be is sometimes the language becomes like 2 people speaking a different language in the same house. Imagine how difficult it would be if one person spoke Polish and the other one spoke German and trying to communicate. So what happens over time is that these love languages, we have these, where before we would actually meet all of them and we would hit the right love language. So as time goes on, because of hurry, we get into a hurry, because of stress reactions, because just responsibilities and just the amount of time,
Life.
we have a tendency to put our relationship on the back burner, and we go for that hack. Okay, that's how I feel love. Okay, I'll go do something for her, and yet she needs you to hold her hand or give her a hug or what have you, right? So we start to forget one another, and it doesn't happen on purpose, but it happens because of just the lack of awareness with everything that's happening in our lives.
You know, Walt, that is so important. And what I'm hearing in that, which I want to just make sure that I'm understanding your point as well, one of the most important things to human beings is to be seen, heard, and understood. And when you're seen, when you're heard, when you're understood, you feel connection. if, as you go back, you are expressing to your partner, to your spouse, your love intent in your love language, not in theirs, that German and Polish, they're not connecting. So therefore, there is this ability to be trying to love your partner, and they feel unseen, unheard, and understood simply because of that. So it rocks the very foundation of the relationship, not just that portion which is love. It touches everything.
You're absolutely correct, because what they've actually found, especially a lot of neuroscientists like Joe Dispenza, they talk about how often, what our behavior is like, right? We feel, we think, we act. So a lot of our in-the-moment decisions is based on how we feel. And what happens is that if we're not feeling loved, we're going to create stories that are going to cause us to have behaviors that maybe come across as unloving. So you're right on that. So feelings are really important for us, especially in relationships, because that was the impetus, or that was the reason why we got together in the first place, is that we felt loved. And so you're correct on that.
You know, when we were reading through Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, a couple years ago, and then we picked it back up to reread it this past year, there's a very interesting concept in it of the love tank and having a love tank. And I'd wonder if you might be able to explain sort of your thoughts on the love tank and how it really is so critical to human relationships.
Love tank. I think if I had to sort of talk about just even the whole the idea of being loved, right? Because what happens is that you said something really important. We all want to be seen. We all want to be heard, but we all want to have a sense of love and belonging. And love and belonging, really, what it really comes down to, really, is that in order to have that sense of love and belonging, we need connection. And because we are these spiritual beings having a human experience, it's important for us to actually really to be able to feel love, to actually feel that connection. And that, exactly that, it's that connection. So the love language is a way of us to deepen our level of connection with our spouses. And if we don't have that connection, which really, it was really fascinating, is because a lot of unmet needs will create shadow side behavior.
So Walt, we have to take a break for some commercials, but we want to come back to where you are right now when we get back, because what you're saying is really so important for our audience to understand and to hear. It's the foundation, really, of the 5 love languages and of any relationship. So we'll see you back in a few minutes.
Why buy local? When you shop with local businesses, you're spending your money on more than just the item you're buying. You're adding a building block to your neighborhood. It starts with a single purchase, maybe a cup of coffee, groceries from a local co-op, or even a shiny new bicycle from one of the nearly 28 million small businesses nationwide. Your money doesn't stay in the till for long, though. Local business owners use the money to create a lot of economic activity in your neighborhood, like buying from suppliers, many of whom are also local businesses, paying taxes to the city, which builds and maintains the infrastructure we all rely on, employing local workers, contributing to 65% of the net new jobs each year. Add this all together and you've got a recipe for a happier, healthier, more connected neighborhood. Now that's an investment worth making.
I am your personal networking concierge, and I host a show on RVN TV called Connect to Success, where I interview power networkers in the greater Philadelphia and South Jersey area. So join me every week, 12:30 on Thursdays during your lunch break, and now on Fridays at 9 and 9:30 p.m. We'll see you next week.
Matters with Dr. Mark
And Liz.
We are here with Walt Aguilar, a absolutely extraordinary coach who has joined us from Vancouver, Canada. We've been talking about the 5 love languages. And we left talking about the love tank a little bit, and we just want to finish that topic briefly. So, Walt, we've always looked at this sort of love tank as it is in a way that most everyone understands, which is that you have a car, you have a motorcycle, it has a gas tank, and you can only run so far without having that fuel. And in a sense, love is our emotional fuel. It's the thing that helps us to connect to other people in a very extraordinary way. And when it's low, we have some difficulties and some challenges, including actions that may not always serve us. So could you speak a little bit about your experience with when the love tank gets a little bit low and how those other behaviors can come up?
Quite often what happens is that if our love tank isn't being filled, and how we talk about it filling is being able to experience love based on the language that you have. And what happens is that we've noticed in a lot of relationships is that when your tank isn't being filled, or for a lot of times, people can actually be running on empty. You'll go looking somewhere else to fill that tank. And what we've actually I've discovered over the years of coaching couples is that quite often it can actually lead to we call it shadow side behavior. So in other words, any behavior that is done on the side, on the sly, anywhere from affairs to going to sites on the internet where you shouldn't, to just anything. Because what happens is that when we're not getting our tanks filled, we will physically experience very kind of negative emotions or negative feelings. And so what happens is that what we have a tendency to do is we have a tendency to go look for things that are going to change the way we feel. They've actually even, in the addiction field, they've actually discovered that addiction is really people just trying to change the way they feel, either numb it or give it a different feeling. And so, and what they've actually discovered that a lot of at the real core of a lot of that is that sense of being separate, of being alone, of feeling lonely. So what happens is that I've had couples where there was an affair in the actual marriage, and after doing all the work, we found out that the person having the affair really didn't want to be with the other person. What they wanted to do is they wanted to be with their own spouse, but they weren't getting their love tank full, so they looked somewhere else to fill it. And so ultimately what happens is that when our tank is low, out of survival, out of that need we talked about, being seen, being heard, and as well as that sense of love and belonging. If we're not getting that with our spouse, we're going to look elsewhere for it. And what we've discovered is that at the very core, our needs unfulfilled.
So, Walt, when you're working with a couple, if you really feel like they're misaligned and they're not giving each other the love, they're each giving each other, I guess they're giving and receiving love in different ways, or they're not getting it the way they need it. How do you then coach them through the 5 love languages to help them understand, to really understand? Because we all know from working with people that we all think we're fantastic listeners. Mark and I talk about this all the time. And we're really not. As humans, we like to listen to respond. That's one of our main things that we like to do. We don't do it on purpose. It's just we want to be ready with our response. So when you're working with a couple, how do you get them to really listen, to understand their partner's 5 love languages and the need for those love languages to be met, and vice versa?
I think the very first thing, it's just like, for example, if you had something going wrong with your car, the first thing we would do is you take it to a garage and you would get a scope. You try to figure out what's actually happening, right? So in the same way with the love languages, it would be really important to have a way of understanding, first of all, what they are. Mm-hmm. Second of all, to be aware of how each person shows up and what's important for them. So, and I know that when you guys work with couples, we've discussed this as well, you guys do a love language assessment. So the first thing is to understand as a couple is that there are 5 different ways of actually experiencing love and also expressing love. Because we know as coaches that awareness is responsibility. Once you become aware, then you know that you have choices. And for a lot of couples, they're not even aware of why they're not feeling loved. A lot of times, often I've had couples that say, I think I married the wrong person. No, you didn't marry the wrong person. You're just, both you guys are experiencing a lot of stress right now, and you're not actually filling each other's tanks the way you need to have them filled. So I would say the very first thing is to help them to be aware, and awareness is nothing more than just noticing. And I know that with a lot of couples, even it's how long has it been since you've actually just sat in front of your partner, looked into their eyes, and talked about something other than just logistics and just about the kids and just day-to-day things, just talking about each other, right? So really just connecting back to each other and really starting to notice each other again. So that's one of the things that happens, right?
Sorry to interrupt you. So do you sometimes feel like you just see this aha because the way you just explained that, I think Mark would agree too. It's so clear that we're just, over time, you just start to miss things. And when you said what you just said, it just seems so clear to me. Do you actually see these couples when you line up their 5 love languages and you show the differences? It shows up in percentages. Do you experience ahas?
Yeah, I think what's really important too is that the big ahas come with the fact that people forget that, like any language, it evolves over time. So that you may have had somebody may have had a love language of touch when you first started. That was their primary love language, but yet 20 years later, it's the words of affirmation. They need to know, because when we first meet each other, when we're younger, we all have those movie star looks. We look great, and then as time goes on, we start to age and certain things happen. Sometimes we just need to be told that we're still pretty, we're still handsome, and that we're still smart. And what happens is the language changes over time. And so what happens is that by bringing awareness back to the situation, it's great. And I think what you said was really important too, is that we all get blind spots as time goes on. So having the humility to get somebody into the couple, a third party like yourselves, who could actually help bring awareness to the actual situation, would really helps them to see where things where the disconnect may.
Well, we just talked about the fact that there is an assessment. It's fantastic. We use it. I'm certain that you use it. Part of it is simply the discussion that we have in developing clarity with the couple and therefore for ourselves. Things change over time, as you mentioned. When you're 18, you're all ripe with hormones. So, maybe your love language is more physical touch. But as time goes on, while physical touch remains important, intimacy is not always physical touch. There's other aspects of intimacy because you've grown. We have found, and we like to see what your thought is, that a lot of times the thing to do to couples to help them to understand their love language is to bring them back to that touchstone of their story. What is their love story? What is the individual story? And have them, in a sense, tell it and relive it. And with your expertise in the love languages and in coaching, we'd like to know your thoughts on kind of bringing people back and having them relive together their love story.
I think one of the things that really opened it up for me is that because I am a believer in God, and I do read my Bible. And one of the things that was really interesting was the idea in Revelation where Jesus was talking to church and said, "Hey, you guys have done everything well, but one thing I have against you is you have forgotten your first love." And he asked them to go do what they did at first. So I think the idea that taking couples back to that point of love, where it was very much, it wasn't just about meeting one love language, it's about experimenting with all of them, right? And not only that, is that in creating that state of that state of being where it's really, where it became very much a knowingness. Because when you're in that state of really care and kindness and compassion, where you were to start, it's a lot different when you're under stress and you're feeling like your tank is empty. You show up differently. And so I think that going back and just doing what you did at first, having those dates, that date night, basically getting each other gifts just for the sake of getting gifts, experimenting with different things. And I think that's really important. I think that's a great step that you guys do in taking couples back to that, because a lot of us, when we're angry, we may not want to go back to that because we're holding things against our partner.
And you know what, that's actually a lot of fun too. When we're talking to couples and we ask them to tell us their love story. And they could be angry with each other. They could be in a difficult place right now, but everybody's got a beginning. Yeah. And when we ask them, just tell us, just so we can have an understanding of where you started, tell us your love story. Even couples who are angry with each other or are frustrated or feel disconnected, they relax a little bit and they start to share how they started. And I love what you just said. We both love what you just said, because it's so important to remember where your foundation was. And you know, we always say that, I can't say for everybody, I'm going to hope that it's for most. Most people don't get married thinking about their future divorce. Most people get married because they want to build a future with the person that they're with. So going back to that foundation of love and how it started is fantastic.
So, you know, as we have to start to wrap up here, the one point comes to mind that you spoke to us earlier about, and that's to lead people with a sense of increase, to leave them with that sense of increase and being better, more optimistic, more inspired, and more hopeful for the future. And you've really done that today, and we know that you impact so many people. So we'd like to take a minute before we close up and let you tell people briefly about you and your coaching program and how they can get in touch with you.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Mark. I think what I really wanted to do is just let people know that there's hope. There's hope, and that life isn't linear. Just because you started with a lot of love, it's not like you've left the love back there. We always think that it's from A to B, but really life is more circular, like a spiral staircase. And sometimes when things aren't going well, sometimes we got to circle back to that point of love to get that back. And that's totally possible, because intimacy, we often confuse it with sex, but really intimacy is being able to still continue to grow individually within the context of the relationship. And one of the things that I do is I help people to become more aware of that process. And I think that one of the things that I like about what you guys are doing is you guys are kindred spirits, and we're all doing that for people. So I think just to let people know that they haven't married the wrong person, there is hope, and there are people that can help them to maybe see some of the blind spots, and to know that you can get back to that point of love. And you just need to learn the language that you guys may need to speak to one another now, by remembering the past and giving you guys at least that compassion and that desire to want to reconnect again.
Well, again, thank you so very much. And if anyone would like to get in touch with Walt, please feel free to get in touch with us, and we will certainly pass on the connection. In the meantime, until we have a chance to see you again, please give us an email or a call at marriagemattershosts@gmail.com. We want your ideas for guests, for shows, concerns in your life to come forward so that we're able to add the most value to you.
Thank you so much. And Walt, you were fantastic. We're so grateful to have you, and we can't wait to have you back. And we know that our audience is going to gain so much value from what you shared today. So thank you, and thank you for listening to Marriage Matters.